On this Missions Sunday morning, I want to talk with you today about missions and me. But before we get to that topic, let me just ask this question. What was on Jesus' heart and mind as he addressed his followers for the last time here on this earth? What was his final charge, his marching orders to his disciples before he ascended into heaven? Lest there be any doubt, all four Gospels, as well as the book of Acts, record his parting words. Matthew 28, verse 19, go and make disciples of all nations. Mark 16, verse 15, go into all the world and preach the good news. Luke 24, verses 46 and 47, repentance and forgiveness of sins will be preached to all nations. You are witnesses of these things. John 20, verse 21, as the Father has sent me, I am sending you. Acts 1, verse 8, you shall be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. So what was on Jesus' heart and mind as he addressed his followers for the last time here on this earth? What was his final charge, his ultimate challenge to his disciples before he ascended into heaven? Missions. The commission to share the good news of salvation with every person in every nation. Which brings me back to today's sermon title, Missions and Me. Now, I chose this title very carefully and prayerfully. Why? Because, quite frankly, I'm not sure that most of us think of missions and me in the same context. We believe that missions has little, if anything, to do with me. We behave as if missions is something out there somewhere in some other country with some other people. And we act as if Jesus' charge, his marching orders, when he ascended into heaven, were only for his disciples and not for me. We're pretty sure that Christ's commission to go was meant for everybody else, anybody else except me. We're confident that the you are my witnesses, I am sending you, doesn't really include me. Certainly the Lord was addressing pastors and missionaries, not me. So we have the sermon titled Missions and Me. This morning I want to intentionally, purposefully bring these two, missions and me, together. Jesus did it. We must do it too. Missions, in fact, depends upon me. It won't happen without me. In fact, God has no other plan but me. It's up to me. And until we are consumed by that conviction, missions will never be and do all that Christ intended. The Apostle Paul understood the me part of missions. Follow along in your Bible as I read 1 Corinthians chapter 9. We pick it up with verse 19. Paul says, though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. Now, did you catch the me part in Paul's words, especially in his summary at the end of verse 22? Let's read it out loud together. Would you read this with me? I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. And why did Paul use all possible means? Verse 23, for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. Perhaps the Message may state that a little more clearly. I did all this because of the Message. I didn't just want to talk about it, I wanted to be in on it. New Life Version puts it this way: everything I do to get the good news to people. I want to do my part in this work. That's the me. My part. It's up to me. God has no other plan but me. Missions and me. So how exactly should you and I individually and congregationally get involved in missions? What is this me part of missions? How do I share in its blessings? How do I get in on it, as Paul says? How do I do my part? Well, I see at least 7 practical ways in the Bible. Beginning with by going. By going. Again, Jesus' final charge is to go. And this includes me. The you in Christ's marching orders includes each and every me among us today. I read it earlier, but let's read Acts 1 and verse 8 out loud together. Would you read it with me? You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. I believe that in this single verse, Jesus kind of outlines, if you will, his strategy for how we are to go. Simply put, Jesus' plan for sharing the good news of salvation with every person in every nation includes these 3 steps, and in this order. First, Jesus says, you shall be my witnesses in Jerusalem. In other words, at home. Missions begin locally. They always begin locally with the lost and the prodigals that are in our circles of influence. Missions always begin locally with ministries like Springville Community Food Pantry and other various ministries that we have right here in our own local church, of which you are a part, and of which we'll talk more in detail in a little bit. But it always begins right here in Jerusalem. Our Jerusalem, you understand, is Springville, right? Always it begins locally.
I guess it started one morning. I was sitting in church, just a regular Sunday morning, and the pastor was talking about missions and long-term and commitment and all of these kinds of things. And I guess normally that would impact me a little bit, but this time it was different somehow. It was like God was pounding on my chest, and I just got this huge smile on my face, and I was ready. I just started looking at my life and asking myself, what would it look like for me to be on mission all the time and devote my life to that and become a missionary, I guess. I remember growing up in church that missionaries would come visit. I was just always captivated by their stories, and I knew that there was a world that was so much bigger than my backyard, and that there were people in that world who needed to hear about Jesus. And I've always wanted to get out there and have the ability to tell people about Jesus and see that transform lives. I just kept hearing the same words: planting seeds, nurture, water, tend, person by person, life by life. Don't wait. You're ready. Just go. I felt like I was kind of waiting around, like, is this something that God would call me into? And when would that happen? Where would I go? What would it look like? And then all of a sudden, it was like this lightning bolt, like, there it is. There it is. I mean, it seemed almost obvious. You need some help?
Yeah, I just gotta put this in there. Thanks.
You want to grab the top?
All right.
My name is Bradley Martin, and I am answering God's call to go. And I am a missionary.
And in case you missed the punchline, where'd he go? Right next door. Because that's where missions always begins. It always begins locally. Second, Jesus said, you will be my witnesses in all Judea and Samaria. Now, little geography here. Just Judea and Samaria were the provinces immediately around Jerusalem. You understand that? So it was the region, and so missions continue regionally. They begin locally, but they continue regionally. And so we have opportunity to get involved in regional missions, like with the baby bottle thing we're doing right now. That's a regional kind of mission as we support the Porterville Pregnancy Resource Center. We have opportunities in front of us right now to get involved with Mountain Home, with the prisoners up there. We're corresponding regularly with Stephen Bird, one of the inmates at Delano. And God's opening some doors perhaps for us to do some prison ministry there as well. We have various homeless shelters and recovery ministries right here within our region. There is now an opportunity before us to have someone in our congregation who would be willing to go to Sierra Care ministry over on Globe Drive by the Twin Lakes there. They're an acute care facility. There's 12 residents in that facility. They're looking for someone who would come in on a weekly basis to just share God's Word in a devotional way and to visit with the residents of that. And so I'm just challenging you. You might be that person. And if you're interested in that, let me know, because that opportunity is right in front of us right now to do something regionally, if you will, to help out in missions in that way. And then Jesus says, you shall be my witnesses to the ends of the earth. In other words, missions finish globally. Missions finish globally. Such as our short-term work and witness team going to Mexico this next Saturday and spend that following week. Going out globally to do that, or the short-term trip we took to Thailand a few years ago and probably will repeat again sometime in the near future, or vocational ministry. There may be among us some people who are feeling God calling them to a full-time vocational ministry someplace other than in our local or regional area to do something. Now, I put in the pews today a copy of NCM magazine. I just put a couple copies in each pew, and I want you to take this, okay? So there should be enough copies to go around for everybody today, and we want you to take this. This will kind of broaden your perspective, if you will, about compassionate ministries worldwide and what we are doing as a church to meet the needs of people worldwide. So that's yours. Take that, and I think, again, there's plenty of them to go around, so grab one of those and take them home with you today. And so what I want us to understand is that all of us can go locally. Every one of us has a circle of influence. Family, friends, neighbors, work associates, schoolmates, others in our circle of influence to whom we can go. And that's where missions always begins, as we saw in the video, right next door. Some of us can go perhaps regionally, and you might feel a calling to get involved in one of these regional missions that I just mentioned. A few of us could even go globally and give our lives on the mission field for the Lord Jesus. In Isaiah 6 and verse 8, Isaiah writes about his own call to God to go. He said, I heard the Lord ask, is there anyone I can send? Will someone go for us? I'll go, I answer, send me. Which leads me to ask, what about you? Are you willing to answer God's call to go, because going is the first step, always the first step in missions and me. Number two, by sending. By sending. And we have an example of this in the church in Antioch in Acts chapter 13, verses 2 and 3. It says, one day as the church was worshiping and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, dedicate Barnabas and Saul for the special work I have for them. So after more fasting and prayer, the people laid their hands on them and sent them on their way. And that, of course, was the beginning of Paul's many missionary journeys. And from that point on, the church in Antioch kind of served as Paul's sending church. He always reported back to them concerning the progress of his missionary efforts. I believe that the strength and effectiveness of a local church is measured by its sending capacity, its seating capacity. Let me say that one more time. I believe the strength and effectiveness of a local church is measured by its sending capacity, not its seating capacity. And it's my prayer that Springville Naz will continue to be a sending church. Not only sending out short-term work and witness teams like our Mexico team, but also sending long-term vocational ministries, individuals and couples and families who will move to the mission field and give their lives to full-time service. Whether young adults who would go to Bible college or seminary to train for missions, or working adults who would make a mid-career job shift and leave the marketplace for the mission field, or retired adults who would give the last and the very best years of their lives to missionary service, I pray that Springville Naz would be a nurturing environment where we would be raising up and sending out missionaries from our own church family on a regular basis. Now you might be thinking, that sounds really far-fetched. But did you know that there are two people in this audience this morning, right now, who are actually thinking seriously and praying about that for their lives? And there may be more, but I know of two who are actually asking God, would it be me that you would want to send? Are we ready to be a sending church? That's the question, because sending is the next step in missions and me. Number three, by giving. By giving. The fact is, it does take resources to fulfill Jesus' commission to go. And the financial support of those in part-time or full-time service is so desperately needed and so greatly appreciated. Perhaps Paul put it best in Philippians 4, verses 15 through 18, when he said, you Philippians were the only church who shared with me in the fellowship of giving. You twice sent me help when I was in need. It isn't the value of the gift that I am keen on. It is the reward that will come to you because of these gifts you have made. Your generosity is like a lovely fragrance, a sacrifice that pleases the very heart of God. And I rejoice that Springville Naz, that for every dollar that we receive in the offering bag on a Sunday morning, somewhere over 20 cents of every dollar goes back out to mission endeavors. You see, we automatically give 14% of our general funds to district, national, and global Nazarene ministries. However, we also encourage our people to give an offering over and above their personal tithe to missions. And you are so incredibly generous. Your donations to things like Alabaster and clean water projects and child sponsorship and baby bottles and crisis care kits and work and witness trips and World Evangelism Fund and Angel Tree and on the list goes. All of that support makes such a huge difference in reaching the world with the good news of Jesus Christ. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you. Because giving is an important step in missions and me. Number 4, by praying. By praying. There's not a Christian worker anywhere, pastor, teacher, missionary, who doesn't covet your prayers. Look what Paul had to say about the role of prayer in missions. Ephesians 6, verses 19 and 20. Let's read this one out loud together. Pray also for me that God will give me a message that I may speak boldly and make known the gospel's secret. Pray that I may be bold in speaking about the gospel as I should. In similar fashion, Paul wrote in 2 Thessalonians 3, verses 1 and 2, pray for us that the message of the Lord may spread rapidly and be honored, and pray that we may be delivered from wicked and evil men, for not everyone has faith, of course. Friends, the battle is won or lost on our knees. That's why we encourage you to pray regularly and fervently for our missions and missionaries. And in that light, I want to call your attention to two prayer opportunities that you may or may not be aware of today. The first is called the prayer mobilization line. The prayer mobilization line. In fact, take this bright orange insert out of your bulletin. Would you do that right now, everybody? Take this out of your bulletin. Just look at it really quick. This is about PML, the prayer mobilization line. And you'll see there that this is available to you either as a weekly email subscription, and there's the information there on how to subscribe to that. They'll send you an email every week about missions and missionaries that you can pray for specifically. Or you can follow them on the PML Facebook page, and you'll get notices every day of current things that are happening around the world with missions and missionaries, so that you're aware of how to pray and who to pray for. It's a great tool. And I wanted to make you aware of the PML, the prayer mobilization line. So that's what that's all about. You can maybe follow up on that. I subscribe to that. I encourage you to do that as well. Secondly, I want to talk with you for a moment about our pre-service praise and prayer time. Every Sunday morning from 10 to 10:30, right here in our worship auditorium, a group of us gather. And personally, I love this time. Yet honestly, I'm a little embarrassed by how such a small number of us choose to participate. Now, I know maybe I'm stepping on some toes and I'm making you feel real guilty and having you squirm a bit. I hope I am. Because if this is in any way a measure of Springville Naz's commitment to prayer, we are in serious, serious trouble. And I want to urge you to reconsider. All I'm doing is just asking you to reorder your priorities, come a little bit early on Sunday morning, invest your time with us, and you'll reap some benefits, not only for you, but for the church and for our mission. There's not a week that goes by in that 30-minute segment that we don't pray for the lost and the prodigals and for the missionaries, for our persecuted brothers and sisters worldwide. And you're invited to join us. You don't have to pray out loud. Some of us do, but you don't have to do that. You can just pray silently. We spend a little bit of time in worship together, and we spend most of the time in prayer together. And I just want to raise that up, that pre-service praise and prayer time, because I believe we need to step that up a bit. And I think there's more of you who need to be a part of that. And I'm challenging you to that today. Reorder your priorities, because praying is a vital step in missions and me. Number 5, by cheering. By cheering. I cannot begin to tell you how much a little cheer means to somebody in ministry. Paul put it this way in 1 Thessalonians 3, verses 6 through 8. Now that Timothy is back bringing this terrific report on your faith and love, we feel a lot better. It's especially gratifying to know that you continue to think well of us and that you want to see us as much as we want to see you. In the middle of our trouble and hard times here, just knowing how you're doing keeps us going. Knowing that your faith is alive keeps us alive. See how a little bit of cheer, a little bit of news Paul heard as he's out there on the front lines, how it cheered him up? Now, there are many different ways that you can cheer a missionary. Let me just give you some samples. First of all, a personal letter. Yeah, the good old snail mail way. Pretty soon we're going to have over next door on our missionary board all the addresses of all of our missionaries that we have hosted here. And our sponsored children addresses will be up there as well on that bulletin board in the fellowship hall. And then as we are praying every Sunday for our district churches, as we did this morning for the Carruthers Church, we're going to start giving you the address and information for those churches so that you can actually write a personal letter if you choose to do so. Just a word of encouragement. Hey, we prayed for you, and we want you to know you're in our thoughts and our prayers. Along with that, of course, is an email. They work well. Not quite as personal as a personal letter, but still we're going to attempt to get all the email addresses and, in fact, all the Facebook pages of all of our missionaries and everybody that we support. We're going to try to get all that information put together in a place where you'll be able to easily access it so that you can be a part of that in the internet and use that to your advantage in that way. A card. You know I love to make cards, but a card ministry, it's amazing how even a little bot card with just a note in it that says, hey, just wanted to let you know I'm thinking about you. You may not even know me, but I know you, and I'm praying for you. And that means the world to a missionary to get a card like that. Or a gift. It could be a monetary gift, of course, or it could be just a care package of, did you know that missionaries can't get the foods we get? You aware of that?
Yeah.
Like Jennifer, let me just give you an example. Jennifer loves hot cereal. One of her favorites is cream of wheat. And she can buy a box of cream of wheat that's about this big. I'm not kidding, that's all the bigger it is. For $15.
Oh. Oh my gosh.
So every so often we buy her a box and we send it to her. There are several other things, by the way, she can't get in Thailand that we get so easily here. And she loves, like macaroni and cheese is one. And so we'll just put together a care package every so often and send it to her. And she is so overjoyed when she gets those things. Any missionary would be the same. And so I just encourage you to be thinking about how you might be able to do something special. And maybe we as a church could just every so often send something to one of our missionaries and just cheer them up in that way. Or just a greeting. Let me end with this one. Whenever we have a missionary here, when we are hosting somebody, which, by the way, pretty soon it looks like we're going to be hosting the Ward family once again. They were with us a few years ago. They're going to be back with us again. And we're going to be hosting them while they're here. And while they're here, would you please, first of all, number one, be here. Because usually we host missionaries on a weeknight, and that's a little bit out of the ordinary. And so I just want to encourage you, be here. Your presence means so much to cheer on a missionary. But when you're here, would you go up and introduce yourself? Say, hi, I'm Mark, or whatever your name is, and just introduce yourself to them, because you might want to hang back a bit and think, well, you know, they're busy. They got other people talking to them. But let me tell you, they want to know you. And the name's important to them. I ran across one of our missionary couples here just recently that we had hosted like 3 years ago, and he remembered my name. I was shocked. I knew him, of course, but he saw me, and he just stopped. He says, I know you. You're Pastor Mark at Springville Church, is that right? Better names than I am. And I was amazed by that. But to see, that meant something to him. That I had taken some time to sit down with him. Of course, I had dropped him some emails and some letters and some things in between times. But he knew who I was. That greeting, your personal time with that missionary means so much. And so cheering is a very critical step when it comes to missions and me. Number 6, by adopting. By adopting. Now, you've heard maybe the term unreached people group. Does that mean anything to you? An unreached people group? Let me share some statistics with you. Did you know that only 10% of the world's population are actually true born-again Christians? Only 10%. Did you know that another 20% of the world consider themselves to be Christians, although they have never actually made a personal commitment to Jesus Christ? So they're not Christians. They just call themselves Christians. Did you know that another 30% are non-responsive? They have the opportunity to hear the gospel. They have a Bible in their own language. They have churches and believers who live in their culture, and yet they have rejected, intentionally rejected, and they are not responsive to Jesus Christ, and they've chosen to say no to Him. But did you know that the remaining 40%, the largest percentage group of the world's population, have never even heard of Jesus and the good news? Nor do they even have an opportunity to hear, because they do not have a Bible in their own language, nor do they have any churches or any Christians living among them in their culture at all. Does that shock you?
Yeah, it seems impossible.
And it should. I mean, 2 out of 5 people on the face of this earth are hidden or bypassed by the gospel of Jesus Christ. They have a distinct language and distinct cultural mores, but Jesus has never yet been proclaimed in their midst. It's estimated that there are some 11,000 such unreached people groups, 3,800 people groups within the Muslim world, 2,700 people groups, tribal peoples, 1,800 in the Hindu world, 900 people groups in the Chinese world, 900 people groups in the Buddhist world, and another 900 in various locations. Just so that we're clear, I want you to understand, we're talking about 3,040,000,000 people who have never even heard the name of Jesus. And although these unreached people groups represent 40% of the world's population, only 10% of the missionaries in our world are working with those people. That's just wrong. Obviously, something must be done. The need is urgent. Look what Jesus told us, Matthew 24, verse 14. This good news about the kingdom will be preached through all the world for a witness to all people, and then the end will come. Before Jesus comes again, we are charged with the responsibility to make sure that each and every person living on planet Earth has the opportunity to hear, understand, and respond to the good news of salvation. So how do we get the job done then? Well, we network with other churches to adopt these unreached people groups. That's exactly what the Nazarene Church is doing, advancing the gospel into yet unreached countries and regions of the world. When I pastored in San Jose, we partnered with 2 other churches in the U.S. to adopt a people group called the Buyi people in Guizhou province in southwest China. When we adopted those people, there were this many Christians in their midst. They had never yet heard the gospel. I had the privilege of going on the very first mission trip over to southwest China, undercover, to meet this people group. And we went over and we spent a week, and all we did was pray. We prayed everywhere we went. We just prayer walked through villages, up in the mountains. We had to hike 12 miles to one village, up a hill, because these are mountain people, and they had no roads. And we soon determined some of the needs that they had, like fresh water, clean water. We've heard about that one before, right? And they were hauling their water up from the river that was completely polluted. They had the mortality rate of their children was incredible. And so we built them a water tower. And they had fresh water. That tower got built while we were gone between the first and the second trip. We went back the second trip, and we hiked into that village again. You would have thought we were their heroes. They met us, and here they had this, it's just this water tower with one galvanized pipe going right through the middle of the village with 3 water spigots. Boy, they made me get under one of them. It was so cool. And I just, let the water come down and drench me. And we were hugging. I couldn't even speak their language. We were hugging, and, then we found out that their kids weren't going to school. And so we found out it was $88 a year to send one of their kids to school. The reason they didn't send their kids to school was twofold. Number one, the closest school is 22 miles away. The second reason is because it costs $85 a year to send their kid to school. Their average, $88. Their average income per household was $85 annual income. Well, you do the math. Doesn't work. So we decided, okay, we're going to start sending kids. We found out how many kids were in the village. We sponsored every one of them. We provided transportation, and we started sending them to school. On the third trip we went back, we were on our way to this village, and we had heard that some of the people had become believers, but we're in this bus, if you could call it that, on this bumpy road, and they stopped to pick up this elderly lady. She's like 80-some years old, which is very unusual, by the way, because they don't live to be 50, 60 over there. And they pick up this lady, and she comes on board with us, and we immediately recognize she's Bouillie because of her dress. They dress a certain way, a certain color and everything. And, you know, we're trying to talk with her, and, you know, no teeth, she's smiling. You know, it was just the cutest thing in the world. The whole conversation changed, however, when she saw my Bible. And she got this incredible smile on her face. She started pointing to herself, going like this. And little did we know, until we got to the village turnoff, and she got off with us, that we were going to her village. And we found out when we got to the village and could finally get some translation going on, that this lady was one of the ones who came to know Jesus because of our efforts. And in fact, that entire village now, every person in that village knows Christ. Not only that village, but the village next to them and the village next to them. Over 80% of the Bouillie people are now Christ followers. How'd that happen? Adoption. I want to see us get involved in that ourselves. So, how do we do that? Remember, this is missions and me, okay? So, let's talk about me for just a moment. Do you know what this is? The 1040 window. You ever heard of it?
Yeah.
You'll see if you know your geography enough that that's at the northern part of Africa to the left, and then as you follow it across, you'll see that it goes through Asia. It's called the 1040 window. Most of the people groups we just talked about, those 11,000 people groups that don't know Christ, almost all of them live within that window. The 3 billion, 40 million people who don't know Jesus, most of them live in that window, right there. And so, as a starting point, I want to begin to ask us to faithfully and fervently pray for the 1040 window. So you're going to be hearing about that. I just wanted to introduce it to you today because we're going to be talking about that a little bit more. And I want us specifically to pray that we would ask the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest field. And then in the months to come, we'll begin introducing some of these unreached people groups to the congregation so that we can begin to focus our prayers on specific people groups. And who knows, God may open up a door, oh, I pray it's true, for us to partner with some other churches to adopt one of those unreached people groups and actually go and introduce the gospel to them. I wish I could say more. So adopting is a key step in missions and me. Finally, by planting. By planting. Church planting is no doubt the most effective way to reach lost people, locally, regionally, and globally. That's why the strategy of starting new churches in unreached or emerging communities has been around since the earliest days of Christianity. Notice what it says, Acts 14, verses 21 through 23, about Paul's missionary work. It says, after proclaiming the gospel in Derbe and establishing a strong core of disciples, they retraced their steps to Lystra, then Iconium, then Antioch, putting muscle and sinew in the lives of the disciples, urging them to stick with what they had begun to believe and not quit. Paul and Barnabas handpicked leaders in each church. In other words, they were planting churches. They were starting churches in these communities that did not have churches in them. And following this timeless pattern, that's why the Nazarene Church has partnered with Dynamic Church Planting International and Lifeway Research in recruiting and training and deploying church planting pastors and leaders here in the U.S.-Canada region as well as around the world. And that's why a couple of years ago I went myself through a week-long intensive training about church planting right here on the Central California district. And by the way, maybe you don't know this about me, so let me tell you a little bit about your pastor for just a moment. Something maybe you didn't know. Did you know that the first church that I served right out of seminary was a church plant?
Yep.
I started a church from scratch. Let me tell you, when that gets in your blood, it stays in your blood. And so while I was pastoring in the East and South Bays up in Northern California, the churches where I was pastoring during those 20 years or so I was there, we gave birth, we daughtered, if you will, 4 church plants out of those churches when I was serving up there. And by the way, I served as the regional director with a ministry organization called Stadia that has planted literally thousands of churches nationwide and around the world. In other words, I wanted you to know, in case you didn't know, that I'm a church planter. And that it is in my blood. And I am passionate about planting new churches. And I long for Springville Naz to find ways to get involved in this strategic way to spread the good news to the yet unreached. And so be watching and listening. I don't know what that means for us. But I do know that we need to be involved in starting new churches. Planting has a lot to do with missions and me. So how exactly should you and I individually and congregationally get involved in missions? What's the me part of missions? How do I share in its blessings? How do I get in on it? How do I do my part? I see at least 7 practical ways in the Bible, beginning by going. Something every one of us needs to do. And by sending. And by giving. And by praying. And by cheering, and by adopting, and by planting. Missions and me. This morning on Mission Sunday, I wanted to intentionally and purposefully bring these two, missions and me, together. Jesus did it. We must do it too. Missions depends upon me. It won't happen without me. In fact, God has no other plan but me. It's up to me. Would you say that with me? It's up to me. One more time. It's up to me. Yeah. And until we get that conviction, until we are consumed by that, missions will never be and do all that Jesus intended for it to be. Let's close by reading Acts 26, verses 16 through 18 out loud together. In fact, I would pray that this would be Jesus' personal charge to you. This is his charge to the me that we're talking about today. So let's read it with that kind of conviction. Would you read it together with me? I have a job for you. I've handpicked you to be a servant and witness. I'm sending you off to open the eyes of the outsiders so they can see the difference between dark and light and choose light. See the difference between Satan and God and choose God. I'm sending you off to present my offer of sins forgiven and a place in the family, inviting them into the company of those who begin real living by believing in me. That's Jesus' charge to me today. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this time that we could just open your word together and take a fresh look, I think, at such an important topic. So important, in fact, that it was the last thing on your mind before you left this earth. Your final charge, your marching orders for us had to do with missions. And so God, open our eyes and our ears and our hearts and our minds to understand that and to accept that. And help us to realize that missions is all about me. It's up to me. You called me. Each and every me in this room, you have called. So may we be ready to say, here am I, send me. I pray in Jesus' name.